Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Hope everything is doing okay today. Let's see, check my sound. I have a few videos planned today, then I have to make a trip to get my license renewed. After which I will be back to do more news. Interesting story that's just been released on the AP, and a fascinating story. I've talked about this in the past, but I've talked about this in the past from the standpoint of other nations. But the idea that the AP is breaking this is amazing. It's amazing. How do you keep the mask of freedom and justice when you're doing things that kind of mean it's not freedom and justice? I'm just saying it looks bad. When you find out that the United States was assisting terrorists to undermine the government of Syria, that looks bad. If you ask anybody, should your country pay money and resources to terrorists to take down another government? Even if you don't like the government, should your country be paying resources to do it? The answer usually is no. Any random person, Joe Schmo on the street, should they take your tax dollars to do that? No. I don't want you to take my tax dollars for that. I would rather have health care. I would rather make sure that person is not living on the street. No, there are better things I can do with my money, as opposed to giving money and weapons to terrorists. We've been assisting Saudi Arabia, a bloodthirsty, cultish regime that's backwards and still chops off heads and hands, our allies. We've been assisting them in this kind of murder of Yemenis. Now, they've been dropping bombs and they've been killing Yemenis indiscriminately with our help. With our assistance, we've been assisting them in doing this. Oil for steel, oil for security. We've taken it to new heights. Saudi Arabia has been weaponizing starvation. They've been weaponizing disease, meaning the cholera epidemic in Yemen. Yemen is one of the poorest countries in the region of the world. Saudi Arabia is one of the richest. Saudi Arabia has all of the military at its disposal, including the acumen, the tactical acumen of the United States military at its disposal in killing and bombing and everything else. And they've been doing it whole hog. A report comes out today, and you find out that you get an idea of U.S. strategy, and you get an idea of the convoluted U.S. strategy. Saudi Arabia has been boasting and bragging about the villages that they've been liberating. Great. You, with the help of the United States, have been liberating villages. Awesome. The thing is, there are two strategies that are taking place in Yemen at once. One, they want to put back the government that was in place before, meaning at this point, it's a puppet regime. You had a government that was there. The Houthis took down that government. The Houthis are now in this kind of civil war in Saudi Arabia. The United States has gotten involved in order to assist Saudi Arabia because they look at the Houthis as being to some degree associated with Iran. So any action of the Houthis is taken immediately as this kind of action of Iran. It's a weird way of looking at it, but that's the way they look at it. So the United States says, no, we need to get involved in this because we want to prevent Iranian expansion in the region. The United States' issue with Iran is that it doesn't control Iran. They put a puppet regime in at once. That puppet regime was overthrown, and now the United States has always had a sore against Iran about it since. Here's the weird part. There are many Al-Qaeda elements in Yemen. And with those Al-Qaeda elements in Yemen, many of those people are on our terrorist watch list. We consider those people terrorists. Just because we consider those people terrorists, however, they are apparently great fighters. Saudi Arabia has been paying off these fighters who are supposedly terrorists and incorporating them into the military units that they're using to fight the Houthis. This is awesome. This is amazing, actually. We are giving logistical support to terrorists because we are helping a country that is using those terrorists. To make this even better, the bragging that was taking place, look, and we're clearing the city, and we cleared that city, and that city, we're just doing gangbusters. Yes. Yes. We're killing a lot of people in the process. We're killing a lot of innocent civilians in the process. No, the United States shouldn't have anything to do with this. No, I don't want my tax dollars used for this. But it is, and we've been killing people in the process. Now, then you get to this interesting point of how have they been doing it? How have they been doing it? They've been doing it by paying them off. They've literally been paying off the terrorists to go away. And they would make deals. The United States would make deals, not the bomb and drone, if they would pack up their belongings and leave. That's how they've been clearing the cities and towns. With the bonus that in clearing the cities and the towns, some of this we've been giving terrorists cash. And in giving some of the terrorists cash, we've also been allowing them to be incorporated into our allies' militias. Essentially, what the AP story is talking about is that the United States, our allies, the people we've been working with to kill and murder people in Yemen and to fight that bloody civil war that we don't have anything to do with, they've been working with Al-Qaeda affiliates, some of which were even some of the sanctions or some of the groups that were used in the attack on 9/11. You can't make it up. In one part of that region, we're fighting Al-Qaeda. In the other part of that region, we are literally working with Al-Qaeda. That's amazing. That's utterly amazing. We are working with terrorists in the overt sense, in the standpoint of Syria. We are working with terrorists through a religious country, like meaning in our logistical support, we are logistically supporting terrorists because terrorists are essentially working with the Saudi government as it goes about its way killing and murdering Yemenis. Can't make it up. Can't make it up at all. I hope I did justice to that. Let's take a look at the story itself in the AP. The article is at the bottom so you can read it all for yourself. But that's basically what's taking place. An AP investigation. U.S. allies cut deals with Al-Qaeda in Yemen. And by the way, the AP did a damn good job on this. They talked to the people in Yemen. They talked to the Department of Defense, like meaning all of these military elements. They talked to people all throughout the process. And they were shocked of what was taking place. You are paying off terrorists. Now, the beauty of this is they respond to cash. They're not these bloodthirsty maniacs. Yes, they may be bloodthirsty maniacs, but they're made that way from the conditions on the ground. They're not that way just in general. They respond to cash. If it was this religious mania, then the money wouldn't matter. Part of the reason that Republicans use this kind of religious right stuff is because those people don't necessarily care about the politics of world stuff. They can use religion to essentially slide over and not care about other issues that are affecting everyone else. Cash was enough. They were able to take their guns and leave. But understand, you believe that the people who you're giving this cash to is not going to pop up somewhere else and shoot either you or someone that's in your interest. Our foreign policy is atrocious. Our foreign policy is atrocious. Let's take a look at this. And by the way, we're creating these terrorists. We're creating these terrorists. Every bomb that you drop, every mom that you kill, every civilian that you injure, you are creating somebody that hates your guts. And is hating your guts, not from a position of, this guy's a religious maniac, but is hating your guts because you killed, injured, hurt somebody I cared about. There's a difference in those things. One is just. The other one's just a religious fervor. Let's do part of this, because I think I gave it a decent explanation as a summary. Right here. Again and again, over the past 2 years, a military coalition led by Saudi Arabia and backed by the United States has claimed it won decisive victories that drove al-Qaeda militants from their strongholds across Yemen and shattered their ability to attack the West. Here's what the victors did not disclose. Many of their conquests came without firing a shot. That's because the coalition cut secret deals with Al-Qaeda fighters, paying some to leave key cities and towns, and letting others retreat with weapons, equipment, and wads of looted cash. An investigation by the Associated Press has found. Hundreds more were recruited to join the coalition itself. Think about that. The terrorists were like, yeah, sure. You're giving me money. I'll join your side and fight for you too. Okay, whatever. The guy's on your list as a terrorist. And now he's fighting in your coalition. That's amazing. I love it. And I'm saying that, ironically, I don't love it. These compromises and alliances have allowed al-Qaeda militants to survive to fight another day and risk strengthening the most dangerous branch of the terror network that carried out the 9/11 attacks. Key participants in the pact said the United States was aware of the arrangements and held off any drone strikes. We are making deals to protect terrorists because they're in our terror network. For this country, if they step foot in Syria, we'd be attacking those people. The deals uncovered by the AP reflect the contradictory interests of the two wars being waged simultaneously in the southwest corner of the Arabian Peninsula. Now, they have this thing where they're calling it Al-Qaeda Arabian Peninsula. So they would call it Al-Qaeda AP. It's almost like a way of distinguishing Al-Qaeda in the different areas of the Middle East. Now, right here. In one conflict, the United States is working with its Arab allies, particularly the United Arab Emiratis, with the aim of eliminating the branch of extremism known as Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, or AQAP. But the larger mission is to win the civil war against the Houthis, Iranian-backed Shiite rebels. And in that fight, Al-Qaeda militants are effectively on the same side as the Saudi-led coalition, and by extension, us, America. Elements of the United States military are clearly aware that much of what the United States is doing is aiding AQAP. And there is much angst about that, said Michael Horton, a fellow at the Jamestown Foundation, a U.S. analyst group that tracks terrorism. Let's see. I'm trying to figure out. All right, right here. All right. The United States has sent billions of dollars in weapons to the coalition to fight the Iran-backed Houthis. U.S. advisors also give the coalition intelligence using targeting on the ground adversaries in Yemen, and American jets provide air refueling for coalition warplanes. The United States does not fund the coalition, however. There is no evidence that American money went to AQAP militants. But it doesn't matter if it went to AQAP militants. If the Emiratis or Saudi Arabia is paying these guys off, they're doing it with the assistance of us. They're doing it with the assistance of us. Right here. Right here. One Yemeni commander who was put on the United States terrorism list for the Al-Qaeda ties last year continues to receive money from the UAE that run his militia. His own aide told the AP. Another commander was granted $12 million for his fighting force by Yemeni president, also known as Al-Qaeda figure, as his closest allies. In one case, a tribal mediator who brokered the deal between the Emiratis and Al-Qaeda gave the extremists a farewell dinner. Oh, ain't that nice? Ain't that nice? Horton said much of the war on Al-Qaeda by the UAE and its allied militia is a farce. It's a farce because they've instigated themselves. Like they're so enmeshed in one another. It's hard to know where one ends and the other begins. So this idea of fighting them, how are you fighting them? It's like fighting yourself. Right here. The United States is aware of an Al-Qaeda presence among the anti-Houthi ranks, a senior American official told reporters in Cairo earlier this year. Because the coalition members back militias with hardline Islamic commanders, it is very, very easy for Al-Qaeda to insinuate itself into the mix, the official said, speaking on condition of anonymity because under the terms of the briefing. More recently, the Pentagon vigorously denied any complicity with Al-Qaeda militants. Since the beginning of 2017, we have conducted more than 140 airstrikes to remove key AQAP leaders and disrupt its ability to use ungoverned spaces to recruit, train, and plan operations against the United States and our partners across the region, Navy Commander Sean Robertson, a Pentagon spokesman, wrote in an email to the AP. A senior Saudi official commented by saying that the Saudi-led coalition continues its commitment to combat extremism and terrorism. Now, here's the thing, and just so we're clear, a coalition began fighting in Yemen in 2015 after the Houthis overran the north, including the capital, Sana'a. The UAE and Saudi Arabia are determined to stop what they consider a move by the nemesis Iran to take over the Yemen and professed aim and to restore the international recognized government of the President Abe Rabo Mansouri Hadi. Despite all their denials, what we're saying here, or what I'm saying here, is true. What the AP found was that they were using Al-Qaeda in their ranks. They were paying Al-Qaeda off in order to leave those villages. Whether you're saying it was specifically some American wrote somebody a check on that is kind of besides the point. Money was going to these terrorists in order to leave the villages. And some of these terrorists were being added into the ranks of fighters for the Saudis, and by extension, the United States. For all their protestations, everything that the AP is saying here is perfectly true. Now, let's keep going. A farewell dinner for al-Qaeda. In February, Emirati troops and their Yemeni militia allies flashed victory signs to TV cameras as they declared recapture. This is an example of what we're talking about. Of Al Sayed, a district of villages running through the mountainous region or province of Shabwa, an area of Al-Qaeda had largely dominated for nearly 3 years. It was painting as a crowning victory in a months-long offensive, Operation Swift Sword, that the Emirati ambassador to Washington, Yusuf Utaba, had proclaimed would disrupt the terrorist organization's network and degrade its ability to conduct future attacks. The Pentagon, which assisted with a small number of troops, echoed that promise, saying the mission would weaken the group's ability to use Yemen as a base. But weeks after the force's entry, a string of pickup trucks mounted with machine guns and loaded with masked Al-Qaeda militants drove out of Al Sayed unmolested, according to tribal mediator involved in the deal of the withdrawal. The United States has killed Al-Qaeda's top leaders and drone strike campaigns accelerated in the years. But in this victory, as in others touted by the coalition, the mediator said armed U.S. drones were absent despite large, obvious convoys. Well, that's interesting. Why is that? Under the terms of the deal, the coalition promised Al-Qaeda members it would pay them to leave, according to Awab al-Dabwal, the province's security chief. His account was confirmed by the mediator and 2 Yemeni government officials. Al-Dahabal, God, that name, Al-Dabaul, said about 200 Al-Qaeda members received payments. He did not learn the exact amounts, but said he knew 100,000 Saudi riyals, 26,000, was paid to one Al-Qaeda commander in the presence of the Emiratis. Under the accord, thousands of local tribal fighters would be enlisted into the UAE-funded Shabwa Elite Force militia. For every 1,000 fighters, 50 or 70 will be Al-Qaeda members, the mediator, 2 officials, said. This is officially the deal. They're adding themselves into the security force that the United States is backing. I love this. Saleh bin Farid al-Wari, a pro-Emirati tribal leader who was the founder of one of the elite force branch, denied any agreement were made. He said he and the others enticed young Al-Qaeda members into Shabwa to defect, which weakened the groups, forcing it to withdraw on its own. He said about 150 fighters who defected were allowed into the elite force, but only after they underwent a repentance program. Repent for your sins. Repent for your sins. The clearing of Al-Qaeda from Al-Shawabi, another province, did not completely take place without fighting. So here's the interesting part. You can imagine that if you have a group of fighters and you say, look, I will pay you, I will give you money to just leave. Go away. And a large group says, okay, we'll take the money. What about the group that doesn't take the money? What about the group that says, we're not doing it. We're not going anywhere. We're not going to take the money. We don't want your goddamn money. Get away from us with that money. What took place was the group that took the money attacked the group that didn't. Because at that point, they're working on the side of the other military. This is amazing. The power of cash. Raw cash. Who needs fighters? Just use cash. One former Al-Qaeda member told the AP that him and his comrades turned down an offer for money with the Emiratis. In response, an elite force squad besieged them in the town of Hatwa until they withdrew. Overall, deals that took place during the Obama and Trump administration have secured al-Qaeda militants withdraw from multiple major towns and cities that the group seized in 2015, the AP found. The earliest pact in the spring of 2016 allowed thousands of al-Qaeda fighters to pull out of Makwala, Yemen's fifth largest city, and a major port in the Arabian Sea. The militants were guaranteed a safe route and allowed to keep their weapons and cash looted from the city, up to 100 million by some estimates, according to 5 sources, including military, security, and government officials. Coalition fighters, jets, and U.S. drones were idle, meaning they were there, they were idle, said senior tribal leader who saw the convoy leaving. I was wondering why they didn't strike them. I was wondering why they're still alive. A tribal sheikh shuttled between AQAP leaders in Makala and Emirati officials in Aden to seal the deal, according to a former senior Yemeni commander. Coalition-backed forces moved in 2 days later, announcing hundreds of militants were killed and hailing the capture as part of a joint international effort to defeat terrorist organizations in Yemen. No witnesses reported militants killed, however. We woke up one day and al-Qaeda had vanished without a fight, a local journalist said, speaking to AP on condition of anonymity for fear of reprisals. Isn't that awesome? Isn't that awesome? I love it, I love it, I love it. God, that's awesome. That's awesome. Essentially, we killed all of these people. We liberated this village. Look at our massive guns and our muscles. Yes! And then you find out they just paid him off. They just paid him off. I love it. They just paid him off. Let's see, Baltazar. That's just your bias. I agree with Cal, but he was losing face by the end. I don't know what you guys are talking about. You guys have lost me. Lawrence, Cal posted it already. What did Cal do? Cal seemed like he was turning into the stereotypical flustered, angry millennial by the end, which seemed like he was falling into their trap by playing their game. What are you talking about, Fox News? I don't know what y'all talking about. I don't know what you guys are talking about. You guys are talking about something else. Look, long story short. Good job, AP. Good job, AP. This was an awesome article. Because we are assisting terrorists. We are in other countries using our tax dollars to essentially pay for things with unsavory ends. We are doing this purely because we believe we are stopping the expansion of Iran, because we are saying that the Houthis are somehow connected to Iran. So we find that we are somehow, I don't know how, are okay with giving logistical support for what seems like a large number of murdering of civilians that Saudi Arabia is doing. What is the constitutional justification for this? What law are we using to allow this to take place? How on earth is us murdering people in this way and assisting in the murdering of people legal? And now you find out we are working with people who are essentially terrorists. Now, yes, we've worked with terrorists in Syria, but here again, we have us working with unsavory characters based on our military alliances in these countries. Is this really what we want our military to be doing? That's the question. And one last point. One of the people that we're working with, was trained by bin Laden himself. I find it to be amazing. So, the article is at the bottom. You can read it for yourself. Yeah, just because one of the commanders makes the point that we've been killing, al-Qaeda. Let's be clear. We are also working with terrorists. If not us, our allies are. And by extension, we are. So let's be clear. AP. Good job, AP. Good job, AP. Let's see. Somebody was helping the channel. I want to know who's helping the channel. TJ Chesney. It's small, but I hope it helps. Keep up the great work, Jamal. Thank you, TJ. I appreciate it. It's hard to reach around the aisle when you're on the same side of the church. The other party is sitting 2 spots to your right, and they're giving a hand job to the arms dealer between the two of you. So are you. Hard to reach around. I got to read that again. I'm sorry. It's hard to reach around the aisle when you're all on the same side of the church. The other party is sitting 2 spots to your right, and they're giving a hand job to the arms dealers between the two of you, and so are you. It's Star Trek meme. Damn it, Jamal. I'm a politician. Oh, okay, I missed that one. Hard to reach around. Thank you. And TJ Chinsney. Thank you. I appreciate it, both of you guys. Yes, Lauren, they do. Public opinion has zero effect on these policies. Well, it depends. Yes and no, Garden. No notification, and Patreon was giving me problems with signing up yesterday. Glad I caught this bit, though. Good. Look, so yes and no. Public opinion doesn't matter if public opinion is not mobilized into doing something about it. Donald Trump comes back. Donald Trump knows there's a witch hunt against him. Donald Trump at this point is taking on the media. He's saying, screw it. They're going to attack me. I'm going to attack them back. And yet, he felt the need when he got back to sit there like he was reading a hostage note about the Russia stuff in Helsinki. Now, I say that to say that the media does, or public opinion does have an impact. It just needs to be organized public opinion. It needs to be pointed, almost like a spear, at whatever it's trying to get across. You just don't have an engaged public. The public is just completely, disenchanted. So it becomes somewhat of a non-factor until it becomes a factor. It's like gravity. Have you noticed? Gravity is one of the weakest forces until it's not. Gravity is one of the strongest forces when it gets to the level of like a black hole or something to that effect, which is ripping apart reality. The black hole. But in normal circumstances, gravity is one of the weakest. In fact, they wonder, why is gravity so weak? Is it frittering away energy into other dimensions? Either way, I don't want to get into this kind of sliding into something else. But yeah, public opinion matters. Public opinion matters though when it's pointed and it's specific. They laugh at protests, not pitchforks. Yes. Gardner, even if the public were to show up with 1 million protesters in DC, I don't think these policies would change. There's too much at stake for the future of the petrodollar. I don't know, man. I think if you had 1 million people on the door of the White House that was there for this idea that we don't want this, and if those people started having general strikes all around the United States, I think it would matter. Bring this country to a crawl. If you even had a small faction of the country that was motivated in such a way, you would bring this country to a crawl. You would get change. Look, the political edifice is there. It's just not used. It's just not engaged. Martian Villager. Progressives need militias for community defense and community service like the Black Panthers. Then the ruling class would have to make concessions. I'm yes and no. That's a Marxist thing. Look, if you start having community militias, you're going to look like the right-wingers having militias. Right-wingers look nuts when they're talking about having militias and whatnot because it seems overtly violent. Even though I know what you're talking about, this thing of protecting the workers. Look, the left is not one of the things that tends to have cash. Wealth is something that tends to be on the other side of the aisle. Our strength in this is our numbers. We are the 99%. That 99% is an absolute translation of the power of cash. Cash, in this case, for the most part, is just labor power distilled into the form of a usable thing where you can transport it, and you have this thing that people have agreed to work for this money. But labor power is a distillation of that. It's what it actually is and what it actually represents. Labor having the capacity to knock on doors, to hold protests, to hold rallies, to hold these things to try to get the public into a mindset, to organize the public into a mindset of class. The class matters. That when Fox News is doing a shtick as if all of them are in the same boat, all of them are not in the same boat. Fox News is for a top 1%, but it coats its language as if it's talking for a particular demographic. The issue here is class. What we're talking about, for the most part, is class. Having numbers. and make that argument with numbers. Matters. I think it matters. I don't necessarily think that's one of those things that's perfunctory. I think that matters. I think when you have a disengaged public, though, you have dollars or pitchforks. You have one or the other. If you don't have pitchforks, then you're going to have dollars. And you already know who has the monopoly on that. A riot is the kind of the unheard. A riot is the language of the unheard. MLK, yeah. Why do you think people are rioting? You think they're doing it for shits and giggles? Like when people are organized, you have 1 million people show up for something, for anything. That is a magnificent number of people to leave what they're doing, whatever their context is, and join up for something that they care about. Yeah, I think if it was consistent or if it was a persistent action, yeah, I think it would change. I think it would change. Bitcoin is still falling because Bitcoin is not a real currency. I don't understand this thing of currency outside of the state. I have a currency, somebody else has a currency. How do you resolve those two things? Like, how do you resolve two things that consider themselves to be currency? State is the thing that legalizes the process. Without state, I don't know how you have currency. The dollar virulently seek the truthful, real news, Silver Report, Uncut, SG Report, Jimmy Dore, X2 Spotlight, Destiny 2. I know, Jamal, I am not a fan of Bitcoins. Yeah, neither am I. Fred, the whole system is unsustainable and will collapse on itself. Yes, that I agree with, Garth. That I agree with. I look at, from the standpoint of the political system, like, let's take Brexit for the moment. Well, let's take us. Let's take the Democratic and Republican Party. The issue that is creating a certain amount of chaos in our society has nothing to do with Russia. It has to do with this kind of economic instability. People's lives are getting harder. And then people's lives are getting harder. They look at their self and they're like, how on earth is this level? Like, I don't think they look at the instability as overtly, but I think they do look at their lives and they say, my life is getting harder. They recognize it. They get it. And they should get it. Why on earth are you in a society that's the richest on the planet and yet $50,000, like you're penalized for trying to go to school? Or, for that matter, penalized for getting sick. Like, these are things that we as a society can come together and deal with, just like other societies have come together and deal with in a sane, responsible way. But we don't do that. And I'm just talking about the basics. Just those two things as basics. We don't do that. Not only do we not do that, we have a rapacious group that's on the right that's talking about undermining and taking down even the small things like Social Security and Medicare that we do have. Trump said he was going to protect it, but I guarantee you they're going to go after it. We have two parties that are captured. And ultimately you have a conversation that's between two corporate parties. People kind of, culturally are raised in one party or the other, and they root for them like a football team, and then they're, disheartened when they don't necessarily get the policies because the policies are not there for you. Every so often you might get an incremental thing, in which case you fight like hell in order to get the smallest bit, missing the point that if you have to fight like hell, then it's not really on your side. And the party's not really on your side. This is going way off the point. This is going way from the point. Let's see, somebody else. Public opinion. How could Trump care about the public opinion when he doesn't even care about the public opinion? Grab him by the pussy, hypocrisy. Grab him by the hypocrisy, hashtag grab him by the hypocrisy. He did care about the public opinion. If two things. If you remember, he backed away on his, the child thing, essentially the separating families at the border. He backed away on that after the public outcry got ridiculous. And I don't mean ridiculous and bad. He should have. The public outcry should have been ridiculous. He was fucking ripping people away from their children. And he also backed away from the Helsinki thing. He backed away from both of those items. Why did he have that press conference where he's reading like a hostage? Do you think he wanted to read that document? That's public pressure. That's him knuckling. Okay. What do you need me to say? Yeah, knuckled under. He knuckled under. Balthazar, like public area reading. Martian villager, would cops have killed Eric Garner in broad daylight if progressives had militias in that community? Look, I don't know. I don't know if they would have killed him. I mean, is it possible that the cops would have shot one of the public people? Yes, it is possible that the cops would have shot one of the public people. In their heads, what they're doing is right. That's the problem. You have a system in which they don't have the capacity for larger thought. I am shooting and mangling this person over Lucy's. Now, whether the person was racist, whether the person was just felt like they were doing their job, who knows? At the end of the day, a person was selling loose cigarettes, and it ended up being somebody dying on the concrete, being choked to death by a cop. We don't analyze that honestly. Why was he pissed off? Why was he pissed off? Did he have a right to be pissed off? Let's start there. Let's start there. Do you believe that anybody would be selling loose cigarettes on the streets if they had finances where they wouldn't be selling loose cigarettes on the street? Like, there's so many of these things where you can start with, where you start pulling at and say, this situation didn't need to happen, but this situation didn't need to happen for structural reasons. Look, I have this thing that people, I find these things to be systemic. That's all. I find these things to be systemic. Some degree it's culture, and some degree your system kind of pushes people and prods people in particular ways that they shouldn't. And in some degree, you put too much responsibility on the cop himself. Eric Garner shouldn't have needed to be out there selling cigarettes, whatever was taking place. If the private enterprise doesn't have the capacity to put people to work, then state should be willing to do it. It is an ideological choice. Full stop. Poverty is an ideological choice. Like, there's all sorts of things that were wrong with that situation. But looking at it from a systemic point, there are multiple points. And we, as a society, don't look at it that way. We don't say, why did this happen? How do we prevent this from happening again? What is wrong with our society that would allow somebody to be choked to death for selling cigarettes? So, yeah. Jamal, can you please address Danny Knapp's comments? I find it fascinating how he accuses me of violence constantly. What did Danny Knapp say? I didn't see his comment. Keep in mind, I don't see all the comments as they take place. Let's see, where's Danny Knapp? You heard his feelings, Danny Knapp. What are you saying? Martian Villager, it's crazy. You push the same violent agenda nonstop on several YouTube channels, no matter if it's relevant or not. Well, I don't know what he said. I don't know what's the violent agenda that he's pushing. Well, cops have killed Eric Garner in broad daylight if progressives that are militant. Oh, I see. But you are, I mean, if you're saying you need a militia, what does that mean? What does that mean? Words have meanings. You're talking about essentially having people in the community to walk around and protect the community. Okay. Are you saying to have this for all communities all throughout the United States? What would have happened if that person, if that community leader would have been there, or that community militia? It sounds like you're talking about a standoff. Now, I agree that the cops shouldn't have choked the shit out of them for loose cigarettes. I agree that this wasn't big enough for them to have this kind of altercation over. I agree with all that stuff. I even may agree with you that to some degree this idea of community policing, it's not that I'm against it. I would hope you not call it a militia. I would hope you call it something else, and that the goal of it would not be in this kind of militaristic terms. But militia comes across to me as military. I suspect that's what Danny Knapp is saying. Jamal, Martian Villager pushes his armed leftist constantly. Every time I see him on YouTube, he's encouraging arming. That's literally all he does. I don't know if he does that on other channels. We have nuclear missiles. They have pot-belly helicopters. Like, your political latitude in space haven't gotten so constrained that the political system can't be changed. I'm just not in that mindset yet. I'm not there. How else can you defend a community without defensive militias? I understand what you're saying, but communities are not... I understand what you're saying. There were cops. Say there were cops out there. Say those two cops. You had 3 or 4. I think at the time you had like 5. What would the community militia have done? Would they have intervened? How would they have intervened? And do you believe that their intervention, the cops would have just walked away? I don't mind an armed community. I certainly think there are plenty of times of day for other aspects of protecting the community to take place as well. I just don't know how it works in practice. And when I hear militia, I think military. That's all. I think of armed militias. I think military. Now, and then you get into this thing of what does that mean from the standpoint of confronting the police? Somebody's out there selling loose cigarettes. Does the armed militia contact what's his name before the police get there? What if the police are already choking him? What does the militia do? You can see that this gets pretty hairy pretty quickly. I don't think the cops would have walked away, but I think Garner might be alive. Maybe. Maybe. Is it possible that the problems are solved in other ways? Look, I don't think the solution to the problem can always be found at the end of the problem itself. Meaning, the end result of the problem, the constraining of decision space, has to do with the way we're organized. You have people who are engaging in behavior because of our organization. He's not selling loose cigarettes for shits and giggles. Before we're arming up the community itself, can we do something about this person being in a situation where they need to sell loose cigarettes? Do you get my point? It seems like the arming is this kind of, it's trying to find a solution at the end goal, as opposed to dealing with the problem at the head. If you get to a point where the political situation becomes completely untenable, then yeah, fair enough. I'm just not in that agreement of arming up in this way. I think this is problematic. In fact, I think you're talking about this kind of war of sorts, or civil war. The most important lesson we can learn from the Black Panthers is how they were infiltrated and destroyed by intelligence agencies. That too. That too. Let's not act like leftist militias have never been done. I'm not saying they haven't. That's why I find people like Danny Knapp to be so silly. He's in a... No, dude, Danny Knapp is not crazy. Danny Knapp fully understands what you're saying. The problem is what you're saying is chaos. Like, if you have the capacity to organize militias, if you have that level of organization, I would suggest you not call them militias. That's the first point. You're going to entice the United States government to do the same thing to that militia as the Black Panther Party. Let alone have a situation where an agent does something and then blames and castigates the group for it. You call yourself militias, meaning they're going to take you from a political standpoint as look at these hostile, violent groups that the left is coming up with. I am giving you advice, fair warning. Even if you want to take activities as a militia, I suggest you not call it a militia. Martian Villager, COINTELPRO was already infiltrating MLK's organization and pacifist civil rights groups. That's true, but you're missing my point. I think you're missing my point. Are there other methods that you could do as opposed to going directly to this kind of arming up? And if there are other methods, arming up seems to be the last solution, not the final, not the solution. I mean, it's not the thing that you go to. I don't have this issue with communities organizing. They should organize. All communities across the United States should have some level of organization. It's kind of like councils or something to that effect. That's good. But you said militias, meaning it comes across as a military thing. That I'm not on board for. If you have the level to get this thing of organization for these communities, those communities should start taking political action. That political action, I would almost wager to you, would get more bang for your buck as opposed to having those people armed. So that's my 2 cents on that. That's my 2 cents. This system is going to collapse. We can't keep going this way. But I don't know what the world looks like with... It just sounds like that's a pretext for a civil war. That's all. If you take that out to its logical conclusion, that's a pretext for a civil war. Now, that said, the organizations from the standpoint of communities, if you're talking about organizing in banking, organizing in food things like food shelters and all that, so yes, 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 hands down, yes, yes. All right, this has gone into weird places. Oh, let me. There was one more. Somebody sent one last thing. Pubic, not public. How could Trump care about a public option when he doesn't even care about the pubic option? Grab him by the hypocrisy. That makes more sense. That makes more sense. I existed in weird places. This works for me. I know, right? Zox, we are dropping literally more than 1,000 per year average income for the already poor in the last 5 years. And not just that, we are 95% of the wealth went to the top 1% of Obama. That's going to dramatically increase under Trump. Mind you, a dramatic increase can only be like 5%. Look, the question to me is rather simple. And I ask this question not as if I'm stuck in a particular society with a particular culture, with a particular idea of how the world should be arranged. I ask as if I'm sitting on the moon. If you bake the bread, if you keep the lights on, if you sweep the concrete, if you are the ones who empty the trash, if you do the coffee, if you make the things that your society runs on, meaning if the 99% of the people that are in society are the ones that are keeping the society going, shouldn't they be the ones that prosper from the spoils of that society? Why do you have homelessness in your society with Jeff Bezos has $150 billion in the bank? I'm saying we need to rethink how we are organizing ourselves. And in some cases, there are certain things that we need to consider to be unacceptable. Somebody living on the street with someone else having $150 billion should be unacceptable. That should be an indication that how you have arranged yourself, your socioeconomic system has failed. There may be pluses, there may be things that it's done well, but there needs to be an acknowledgement of the failures that are part of that process, especially if you're looking at this from a humanistic standpoint. What matters more, cash or human beings? I understand the 1% taking the perspective that the system is great, capitalism is awesome, how we've organized ourselves is fucking spotless. And I've even heard capitalists make an argument that we don't even need democracy. We just need capitalism. You can understand why he would say that. Somebody's poisoning your well. Somebody is pumping stuff into your sky. And from the standpoint of the business themselves, the world is fine. The world is great. What's the problem here? Well, my kid has to breathe that air. My uncle has to breathe that air. My nephew is swimming in that water. Capitalism hates the fact that the democratic process can put limits on how it goes about making its profits. To them, the goal is to maximize their profit, meaning if they need to put something in air, if they need to put something in the water, that's a sad day for you. The democratic process says, well, no, it's not a sad day for us because ultimately it's our air, it's our water, and there will be limitations on the way that you go about your affairs. These two things rest uneasy. And the fact is, we've had a system where both political parties have been captured by corporate interests. And that corporate, plutocratic, predatory interest has gotten its way from the standpoint of policy and taxes. The gap between the rich and the poor is not getting better by an act of God. It's an act of your economic system. And it's time we take another look at how we arrange ourselves. Maybe we don't like poverty in our country. Maybe we don't like people sleeping on the street. And maybe we need a tax code that represents that. So I'm going to end this here. We ended up in an odd place. Jamal, call talk radio tonight. George Galloway is on UK time, 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. So it's 12 o'clock. Oh, he's on in 30 minutes. He's on in 30 minutes. All right. So I'm going to end this. I still have a few more shows that I'm going to do tonight. Pubic. I think that's Balthazar. Pubic Opinion. I'm sorry, I think that's Baltazar. Also, TJ Chesney, thank you very much. Hard to reach around. And I also think that's Baltazar. Guys, I really appreciate your support from the channel. It really does help. And especially with this Google thing. I appreciate it greatly. This article is at the bottom. This article is absolutely fascinating. We've been paying off militants, helping terrorists in Syria to undermine that government, and in the other government working with countries that are essentially working with the terrorists. In some cases, people who essentially hit us on 9/11. That's amazing. Remember, those people were Saudis. And Saudi Arabia has been spreading terrorism all throughout that region of the world. If you don't believe me, take it from Hillary Clinton herself. She said it in WikiLeaks. Did not stop her at all from taking their money. So, alright guys, if you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks everyone.